Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our live event series, Springing into Adventure. This evening, we are bringing you family cycling adventures. A big thank you to our series supporters, Grangers, a British brand who are dedicated to protecting your equipment against the elements. So this evening, joining us will be Karen G, founder and editor of Cyclesprog, and this is a website set up to help you all about cycling with your children. So Karen and her husband Chris launched this site 9 years ago when the boys were very little and they were struggling about how to work out how you can cycle with two very young children. So over the years, the families have had lots of cycling adventures, some very close to home, others further afield, and they've continued to write about what they've learned along the way. So fast forward to now, Cyclesprog has expanded massively, continuing to help and inspire other families, and their webpage gets around 1 million visitors every year. And in 2019, Karen was named one of Cycling's UK's 100 Women in Cycling, and she's just recently given up her job as a project manager to concentrate fully on Cyclesprog, which now has a team of 7. So I think we can safely say that we will be in safe hands this evening. Now, fast forward to now, Karen's boys are now 14 and 12, and their latest challenges are finding equipment and clothing that's big enough for the boys, and also finding the fitness for Karen and her husband to keep up with the boys when they're all pedalling out together. So this evening, Karen's going to be talking us through their journey as a family and cycling, and also providing us with a few helpful hints along the way. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment sections and we will get round to them at the end, and also let us know where you're tuning in from this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Karen. Hello.
Hi Hannah, thanks for having me.
How are we doing?
Very good, thank you.
Brilliant. So we've got a lot to get through today. There's a long journey to get through, so I thought we'd get straight into it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let's go.
So let's go right back to the start. Before you were a mum, before you had a family, did you cycle?
I did, yeah. I was quite a keen cyclist, Hannah. I started really cycling for transport as a way to get around. And I lived in a couple of big cities, so it was, the cheapest and easiest way to get around. And then in my mid-20s, I moved with my boyfriend, as he was then, Chris, up to Chester. And we bought mountain bikes, and that's when we started going out the weekends with the tent and just riding our bikes at the weekends. So yeah, it was a big thing for me before I had the kids.
Wow. And then, so you had your babies, and how did your cycling change?
Well, initially it stopped completely because I didn't know that you could cycle with a baby, with the young children and babies. So when we first had the eldest, we didn't cycle with him at all. And I actually cycled to get away from him, just to have him at the weekends, and I would go out on my bike just for a bit of fitness and a bit of me time.
Wow. So how has it changed then from not cycling at all with kids and having that as a break to suddenly having a website where you're creating all this advice and stories?
It wasn't sudden. I can tell you, it's been a journey over a number of years. But it actually started when a friend of mine who had a child of the same age, she turned up with a rear bike seat. And I had no idea that these existed at all. And they're just a seat that goes on the back of your bike, and you put your toddler or small child in it. And you can see here, it's just a very compact way of traveling with your child. And it just made us go, wow, we didn't know these existed. So we went straight out and bought one. And it really opened up the fact that we could start to get out on these two-wheeled adventures. And initially, we just went on quite local rides, and then we started to go further afield. And we did that for a number of months. And then I got pregnant again. And then it all kind of stopped because I only just worked out how to cycle with one. And this is one of the problems when you're cycling with children. You don't necessarily, last in one stage for very long, because they keep growing, or you have another one. So then it was back to the drawing board. But obviously we'd got the bug by then, so we knew that we wanted to cycle again. So we ended up with a trailer that we were able to carry both children in. This is a picture of a trailer. At the time, I didn't know I was going to be talking about it, almost a decade later. So we didn't take any photos at the time of it, or any that I can find. But trailers are great because you can get a bit more protection from the elements. So we were able to use it year round for commuting. And they're great if you're going out on sort of reasonably flat, wide paths, like you can see this one being used. So they're quite popular for when your children are of an age where they want to be pulled around and they can't pedal themselves. I think we actually got through 2 trailers. We were using it so much.
Wow.
Yeah. But then the problem with the trailer is, as they get heavier and heavier, it got to the point where we couldn't actually pull it anymore. So we went on to having the youngest one on a front seat at the front. And this was a stage I really loved because you're kind of cuddling them and you can have chats with them, and it's very interactive. And so when they get to the sort of the age of sort of 18 months, 2 years plus, they're very vocal and they want to talk about everything that they see. And you can use these up to basically until you can't see over the top of them anymore. And then I guess you asked me, how did I get into Cyclesprog? Well, that photo actually sort of sums it up. That you can see his little fingers. I don't know, can we pull that up again? Yeah, you can see his little fingers on the handlebars in the left-hand picture. And we were really struggling to find a pair of gloves that fitted him. And my husband and I spent ages online looking, and eventually we found a pair, and it kind of dawned on me that, we'd try to find out about these things and it just wasn't easily accessible to us. So I said to my husband, there should be a website about this. And he said, well, why don't you set one up? And, eventually we did, because it was obvious no one else was going to do it. And it's just grown from there, from us just blogging about how do we find a pair of gloves and how do you travel with a baby or a young toddler to the website it is now. So that's been our sort of the journey of Cyclesprog. In terms of how we then carried on after the front seat, we moved on to having a tag along for our eldest. As you can see here, it's a boom. If you don't know what a tag along is, there's sort of a boom that fits on the back of your bike, and you have a rear wheel. And that's a great way as they're starting to be able to pedal for themselves. You can get out and about. You can see you can do it in any weather, really. So this is sort of a bit of snow. We've had snow in Cumbria this week. So
summer's not quite here yet.
And I was able to pull one behind me and have one on the bike. And obviously at that time as well, the eldest started to want to pedal himself. So that's an interesting phase when you're going through that as a parent, because suddenly your child wants to pedal. So everything slows down a bit. So sometimes he would ride and there'd be me on a tag along. So me with the front seat and him on the bike. And then we got another really good thing called a follow me tandem, where you can let them ride by themselves on their bike, and then you can hook their bike to your bike when they get tired, which is a really great idea. So that got us around numerous trail centres and other sort of bridle ways that we were on at that time. I think that's us in Delamere Forest in Cheshire.
And I imagine having that, you can go further than you think.
Absolutely. And they can ride for a bit, and then when you get to a bit, or if they just get tired and fed up, you can hook them up and get a lot further. So while you've kind of got that in your control, it makes it much easier. There's also, I mean, just to talk about some of the other options that we didn't necessarily have at the time, but there are cargo bikes as well. And they're a great thing if you're doing a city break. So we went to Amsterdam, you can see us there. So if you're having a sort of urban adventure this summer, then that's a really good option to look for when you're renting bikes. And there's also some options that didn't exist when we were sort of at that stage, but you can get tow ropes now as well, which will allow you to haul your child behind you up a hill. You can only use them uphill, but if you're going to more steep terrain, off-road stuff, that's quite a good option. So we've used all sorts of different kit out there to get out on our adventures, and then suddenly they both ended up on their own bikes, riding themselves, able to pedal. And then everything, that's my youngest kind of learning to ride, and then everything changes then as well, because when they both want to ride all the time, it slows down suddenly and you have to kind of readjust where you want to go for a bit, and then one day you suddenly realize that they are faster than you.
And the table's just turned.
And they're better than you, and everything, and they've got more confidence. So it's a kind of a journey.
And there's a lot of different equipment there as well, which you mentioned. And obviously you, as a family, you kind of tested and trialed along the way. But do you need it all? And how expensive does it get? How accessible is it for people?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, obviously we had a lot because we were running a website, so we got sent stuff to review. Yeah. We wouldn't have needed all of it had we just been doing it ourselves. And I think it's really important, you just have to work out what's right for you, both in terms of cost, the sorts of riding you're going to be doing, and also in terms of storage, because some of the things are bigger than others. So trailers are much bigger to store than say a bike seat. But you don't have to buy. So one of the things I always recommend is sort of renting before you buy. You can do that maybe from a trail centre or any sort of holiday destination that's got rentals. That's how we started out doing things. And I would recommend, if you're going to do that though, always book in advance, because sometimes it'll say on the website that they've got maybe a trailer, but they may only have one. So you don't want to be disappointed if you turn up with your kids. And there's other options. So there's some online options. There's a online bike trailer thing. I think it's called Kids Bike Trailer Hire. And they rent out trailers, front seats, and car racks as well. Because car racks are a thing as well. You've got to be able to transport your bikes. That's why sometimes renting is easier. And then there's always eBay. So there's quite a big second-hand market in these things, especially as if you buy a quality thing, it tends to be outgrown rather than worn out for most people. So you can get some bargains on eBay.
Yeah. Especially if you've got kids that are, obviously they never stay at the same stage. They're just growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, they keep growing. And when it gets to the bikes, they're constantly growing through their bikes. So there's also a scheme called the Bike Club, where you can do a monthly lease scheme. So you move through the bikes, and when they grow out of them, you send them back and get the next size. So quite a lot of parents are using that at the moment. And it's probably worth me saying, I've put something on our website on the front page as a little article that will link to lots of things I talk about today. So I can't remember what that scheme's called, but it's in the document there, so you can find the links if you're interested. So there are ways to do it more cost effectively, but also if you find you're going to use it all the time, then you end up sort of realizing that it's possibly worth investing if it's going to be something that gets you out of the house and your kids love doing with you.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, it's always worth trialing these things, because you never quite know how it's going to go down with kids.
Yeah.
So it's good that there's all these different options for people.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about the gear and, where to get it from and everything. But we'd love to hear a few stories, as I assume you've got a couple over the years as a family. But can you tell us a bit about your first family cycling adventure?
Yes, the sort of first proper family cycling adventure, I'd say, that was where we were going somewhere completely different and we didn't know what we were doing, was on our holiday to Cornwall, and we decided to do the Cornish coast to coast. We hadn't taken any bikes with us. We'd intended it to be a bit of a beach holiday, and we decided, right, we're going to rent these bikes. And the Cornish coast to coast is sort of on one of the narrow bits of Cornwall, so it's only about 11 miles. So if you were going to do the whole thing both ways, it's 22 miles. So we thought, oh, what a great idea! We'll rent bikes, and we got a little rear seat for the little one and a bike for the older one. And we set off, and we weren't even at the start. The rental place was quite a few miles inland, but really thinking about it, they'd never ridden that sort of distance before. So it was quite a big undertaking, but it was a lovely day and we were having a great time, and we were just cycling along and really good fun. And then we kind of got probably sort of just over half the way that we wanted to get. And we arrived at a sort of a bike place further down, and it had a cafe. And my eldest just went, right, I'm tired now, I'm not going any further.
Oh no.
So like, oh no. So we hadn't seen the coast. We didn't start at the coast and we didn't finish at the coast. But Chris actually rode on, took a photo of the coast and came back again. Then we turned round, and it was kind of, we hadn't realised this, but it was downhill slightly all the way. We hadn't realised. It was just a very sort of gentle gradient, and then we turned round and it was just slightly uphill all the way, so we had to try and get him all the way back. And then we realised, oh goodness me, it's the bike place is going to close, so we've got to try and get back. So it was just a fraught thing. We learned loads of lessons on that ride, but we made it back. And it was great fun, and the kids loved it. So that was kind of our first real adventure. And from that, we learned all the mistakes, and we try not to make them again, but sometimes you do.
Well, they always say your adventure only starts when things start going a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of found you've learned the hard way on the first big ride with the kids. So obviously, moving forward from that, what are your hints and tips for planning a route for your family to do?
So given what I've just said, I mean, my big hint and tip is not to try anything that you couldn't do without the kids. So if you've never been mountain biking before, it's probably best not to go straight out mountain biking with them, or, if you've only done sort of very gentle around the park type cycling, just stick with that. Because really, the key is to all have a good time and end up smiling at the end of it.
Yeah.
That's really important. So I always sort of say less and happy is better than more, and everybody being sort of upset and tired about it. And then there's lots of things you need to think about. So things like, how far have you been before? What's your child capable of? Are they on a new bike or a rental bike that might be different for them?
Yeah.
How tired are they before you set out? So if you've had a really busy day the day before, especially if you're on holiday, they're going to be a bit tired. And then for everybody, things like the weather can make a big difference. So if it's really cold or if it's really hot, that was a really hot day. You have to factor in things like that. The gradient makes a massive difference as well. So if it's really steep, you can expect them to have to maybe get off and push for some of it. The terrain makes a massive difference as well. If it's really rocky or really muddy, that's going to take you a lot longer. That was a particularly muddy day, that one. That will take you a lot longer to ride through, obviously, than if it was a nice firm piece of tarmac. And then just things like, if it's a new route, you might get lost. You might have to spend a lot of time looking at the map, so that can sort of factor into your time. So it's lots of things to think about. It's all common sense, though. You don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it, but just don't bite off more than you can chew, and give yourself enough time. We've made lots of mistakes, like fading daylight. If you're riding in the winter, that's a big one. You start to think, oh no, it's going to get dark. Mechanical problems. If you're going to have a puncture, it's always going to be at the end when everybody's tired. Always remember to take your puncture repair kit, because it's no good if it's sitting at home on the kitchen table. We've learnt that the hard way. Always remember to take the locks and the keys to your locks. There's a whole load of things that you need to remember. But you make mistakes and it's fun, and then you try not to make them again.
They make great stories, though, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
And some memories that you just will never forget.
You never forget. You're kind of going along to go on your bike ride, and then you realise that you lock the bikes to the back of the van and the keys are on the kitchen table, and you have to turn around and go home. Things like that.
You've all been there.
Do that again.
So what kind of places would you recommend for family cycling?
Traffic-free routes are some of the obviously the ones you're aiming for. And I can see somebody's put on the question, actually, there's a Cornish Coast to Coast cycle path along the road, and it's mainly off-road. There's about 200 metres on road. That's the sort of thing you're looking for. You're looking for sort of trails. And Sustrans is a good place to look. The Sustrans website, they manage the National Cycle Network. So when the kids are little, you're looking for really nice, wide, flat paths. And other places that are good to look is if you're going somewhere, sort of the local authorities' website will often now have pages about cycling and good routes. Reservoirs are always good if you've got little ones, because they tend to be flat and circular. So as long as the reservoir is not too big, and things like old railways, old tramways, old canals. We've got an old canal here in Chester, Kendal, which is a really nice flat route for younger ones. As they start to get more competent and capable with their riding, then you can start to look at things like the national forests, where they'll have graded trails, and then quiet roads and things like that. And then as they get even older, you might want to go to places like bike parks, like you can see there, if they're into the sort of mountain biking side of things. So lots of options.
Yeah, definitely. And I think round here they've got Grisdale, which is great as well.
Yes, yeah, Grisdale's a good one in Cumbria. It's very steep, so you do have to be careful, especially coming out of the visitor centre. It can be a little bit brutal if your kids are not quite used to riding up hills. So finding out what the terrain is and what the gradient is really, really important before you set out.
Yeah, I bet, because otherwise you're going to have unhappy complaining kids, which is not ideal. So speaking of that, what have you found over the years is the secret to keeping your kids happy when you're out on the bikes?
Snacks.
Yeah.
Snacks. If you don't out enough snacks, it's a nightmare.
Right.
That's us just having a little snack break. We just got constantly eat. You have to keep them fueled. Then other things like making sure they're wearing the right clothing. So if you've got a child who's in a bike seat or sitting in a trailer, they're not actually expending any energy. So you need to make sure that they're really nice and warm.
Yeah.
On a hot day, they'll get too hot. On a cold day, they'll get cold really quickly. So layering is really important. And always having spares in the bag to put on is really important. Finding things along the route to keep them entertained is really good as well. So it's not just, especially when they're really little, telling them you're going on a bike ride is a bit boring, but telling them you're going somewhere, there's going to be a play place or something to do at the end is good. And then things with interesting things along the way. The national forests are usually really good at this. That photo on the left it's actually at Grisdale. They've got a strange set of things there. They've got sculptures, and this one was quite funny. We were parked up just having a bit of a snack, and the kids went off to do a bit of exploring, and they came back and they were like, "We found a living room." And I was like, don't be silly. And they were like, no, we found a living room. Come and have a look. So I sort of followed them around the corner, and there it was, a living room, with a TV and a sofa and a lamp and some curtains. I couldn't quite believe it. I thought they were joking. And the big head that was there is at Kielder Forest in Northumbria. And there's just like a series of these art installations, and you can ride from one to the next and take lots of good photos there. So things like that are always good ways of keeping them entertained. As they get a bit older, you can involve them in the route planning. So, for example, we did a tour around some of Wales's trail centres one summer holiday, and we asked everybody to pick a trail centre and a trail to ride. So, it gives them something to get really involved in. Things like Strava can be good as well as they get older, to measure their timings and set themselves challenges. So it's just constantly adapting as they get to be older as to what you do. And then I think at any age, treats at the end, that promise of a hot chocolate or a piece of cake or whatever as you're going along is really, really important and motivating. I think more or less for parents as well as kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And lovely cafes to stay to go to, and I think snacks is the biggest thing there.
Yeah, absolutely, never go without snacks.
So when you're obviously you've cycled with your kids from when they're really young and they need a lot of help, and as you say, they're kind of getting older to the point where they're planning their routes and getting into mountain biking a little bit. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, mountain biking. I mean, you can start mountain biking with your children when they're really young, and you can get front seats now that are designed for mountain biking with your sort of toddlers. They're great fun, and they can get them used to it on the trail. But then there's a period. I mean, mountain biking, it's all in the name. It's a bit hilly, so they do have to be able to get up the hills. This is where the tow rope comes in. If you can get one of those, you can actually tow them up the hills. But the key is, can they get up the hills, and then have they got the skill to get down them?
Yeah.
A lot of the forest parks and the trail centres have got graded trails, and some of the greens are actually quite very flat and family friendly. So if you're going to start out, it's always good to go and start on a green trail, just to make sure, again, you're not biting off more than you can chew. And then when they're happy with the green trail, you can move on to the blues. And the blues are all really good fun. They're all rollable. There's nothing horrible on it, but you'll get some berms and some ups and downs and things. And they can pick up a bit of speed, and that's always really good fun. And again, gradient is really important. So a blue at somewhere like Grisdale or Whinlatter is going to be a lot harder than a blue, maybe. Or there's going to be a lot more climbing than a blue somewhere that's in a much flatter area. So you do just have to be careful what you're doing. All of those types of trails you can do with just a normal hybrid bike. That's a trail centre in Wales, which is, so you can see stunning views, and it's all really good because you know what you're going to find. There's not going to be any surprises on the trail. So if you're on a blue route, you're not going to suddenly find you're dropping off the cliff face or anything. And they tend to be very well signposted, so there's not much chance of you getting lost. So it's a great way to get into it.
Seems like a great way to start it as well. If you're just getting into that, it's a lot of guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really sort of safe environment to do it in. Then you can move on to the next grade up is a red route, and then you start to get into sort of more technical stuff, and there'll be features on the trail for them to test and try. And that's the sort of point where you might want to consider getting them a bit of training, skills training, and yourself as well, because it's a bit like you wouldn't go skiing. You wouldn't take the kids skiing and expect them to just like go off down a red route. So lots of places offer, a half a day's training. Which is really good. And also local Go Ride clubs and other cycling clubs often do skills training. If you kind of really get into it, then sometimes it's worth investing in a mountain bike, especially as they get older, if it's going to do something that you do a lot. But you can ride with just a general good quality kids hybrid bike up until that point. The ultimate trails are the blacks, which are just, to me, totally scary. But a lot of kids have got no fear and they go down those ones, but you do need a level of skill to do that. A lot of trail centres as well have got little skills areas. So, for example, around here, Gisborne's got a skills area where you can actually go and practice the different grades. So that can be really good as well. And some kids will just happily go around the skills area all day. There's a good one at Dalby Forest in Yorkshire as well. And there's a sort of a little bit at Whinlatter as well, up near Keswick, where you can sort of just ride a really short blue route from the car park so that they can work out whether or not they're able to do it. So it's little things like that, testing them out. And then you don't have to do it in this order, but how we did it, we did trail centres first. And then when we'd got our confidence up, then we started going out sort of what I would call proper, old-fashioned mountain biking, where you just go and find the bridleways and off you go. And that's a bit more hit and miss, really, because you don't know what you're going to find on the route. So your child does need to be able to be a bit more competent. And you haven't got as many signposts and things, so you need to be able to read your map and stuff. So it starts to become a lot more serious when you're out there. But I absolutely love that. And I think my youngest was about 7 when we were able to start going out and riding some of the fells around Cumbria. And the views you get, and you don't tend to meet anybody else. So it's a really exciting thing to do with them.
And what about the costs involved in mountain biking? Because it's a whole different kettle of fish from road biking.
Yes, I mean, mountain biking. I mean, again, like I said, you can ride most of the easier trails on a general hybrid bike. So as long as your kid's got a good quality bike, so the brakes work, you probably don't need too much more. You do need to make sure you're fully equipped with, what you might need for the day. So you need a rucksack, and you need water bottles, and you need the layers, and making sure they're warm and stuff. You don't necessarily need protection or anything like that until they start to try and do tricks. But we did end up investing in elbow pads and knee pads and things for all of us, just in case you come off. And then it's like anything. You can spend an absolute fortune on things, or you can do it very cheaply. And it just depends on if you really get into it. Some summers it's what we've done every weekend, so it's something that we're more willing to invest in. And again, if it's something you just want to try once or twice, then go to the trail centres and hire bikes. Most of them have got, a good range of equipment. They tend to start mountain bike hire from about 20-inch wheel. So as long as you book in advance, you should be able to get something for a fun day out.
So once you've kind of got a bit of the gear and you've had like a lot more experience, and you've gone to different places, and just talking about when your kids are getting older as well, and motivations, there's also events as well, little events that you can take part in, and I think your family have taken part in some.
Yes, yeah, you can actually, there's all sorts of events, and hopefully some of them will get to take place this year. Obviously some of them, it probably won't look like that.
A couple of
yeah, that's a Tour de Staveley that I did with my eldest. So that was a road bike event, and lots of local cycle clubs will run them, or local bike shops, and British Cycling run things as well. If you're in a more urban area, they have sometimes big urban rides as well, which can be great fun, and they're easy to do if they close off all the roads. We did a couple of those when the children were younger. And then there's some mountain biking events as well. There's a great one around here called the Sam Horton, which is quite hard, but they provide lots of cake. So we did that with our kids as well.
And what does that involve?
That's lots of climbing and lots of standing, and lots of waiting for mum. That was kind of a really embarrassing one. The kids are much faster than me. We had to do it as a team of 4, and they spent most of the time standing around waiting for me. So, but yes. So I think if you look on the British Cycling website on their events page, most events are listed on there. So you can find what's going on, or just in the local press and stuff. Wherever you are in the country, there's usually events. So yeah,
so there's lots out there, and hopefully
lots out there. Yeah, because with an organised event, you don't have to worry about the route or anything like that, and there's usually marshals to help you if you have a mechanical problem or something like that. So
yeah, and also I guess it's a nice sense of community, being amongst other cyclists. It must be nice, and like a sociable thing as well, and great when your kids are growing up for that as well.
Yes, that's really good. Yes, and they love it if it depends on their age, but if they get to the stage where they can overtake adults, they absolutely
which is happening pretty soon. So I've also heard a little bit more about like bike packing recently, and I know that's become a lot more popular with a lot of people holidaying within the UK. Is this something that you can do with your kids? Have you guys done it?
Yeah, I mean, bike packing, for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's where you carry everything with you. So you carry your tent and your sleeping bags and everything that you're going to need, and you go from place to place, and you do that. Now, I think at the beginning I sort of said what I'd done before I had kids. So I'd done mountain biking, I'd done camping, so I felt comfortable doing that with my kids. I'd never bike packed, and neither had Chris. So it's not something we know anything about, we have any kit for. So I haven't done that with them yet. What we do is we choose to go and camp somewhere, set up the tent, take it in the car or the van, set it up, and then ride out from there each day, and use that as our base. So we're not actually carrying all of our equipment. That makes it, from our perspective, easier, and we're happy doing that. And I think the thing about it is there's no right or wrong to going out on a family adventure. You can go out for an hour, or you could go out for a month, and we've done sort of things in between, everything in between that. So it's really finding out what suits you as a family, and budget, energy levels, stress levels, Some people absolutely love planning a bikepacking adventure. For me, I like to be slightly more sort of stuck in one place, set in one place, as it were, and have somewhere to come back to each night. So yeah, and as a result, I mean, we haven't bike packed, but we've been all over the world really with the bikes. We've done. Where have we been? We've been to we went to the French Alps and had a week in the French Alps riding with the kids. We've been to America and Canada twice and ridden in the Rockies over there, which was absolutely fabulous. This is a good example of when you ask them to do too much. The left-hand photo there was a very steep day, and we didn't realize before we set out what the gradient of that trail was going to be, and it wasn't until we stopped afterwards and looked on Strava and we were like, oh my goodness, no wonder they were exhausted. But when we got to the top, wow, it was worth it for the descent coming back down. And then we've cycled all over the UK in England, Wales and Scotland. And sometimes we go for one night or 2 nights for a long weekend. And then other times we've been away for, a week, 2 weeks or a month. So you just do what suits you. And as the kids get older, they can do more. They've got more energy. One piece of advice I would give is if you are planning on cycling, most days in your holiday, do have some time off.
Yeah.
It's really easy to think, I've got to cycle every day. And actually the kids don't necessarily want to do that. So sometimes it's good to have a day on the bike, a day off the bike with something else to do. But you also have to make sure that you don't do too much on the day off the bike, because sometimes they're so exhausted after having a day not doing things on the bike that it's just always a happy medium of keeping the energy levels going.
Wow. And so you've done a lot of trips, like you're saying, further afield and also in the UK. But I'd like to ask you if you have a particular, like a favourite trip that you've been on and why?
Oh, that's really hard. I mean, if it was overseas, then it has to be when we went to Canada and America.
Yeah.
And we went to the northwest coast, and we went 2 years in a row. Actually, we were very, very lucky. And first time we flew into Vancouver, and then we went north through British Columbia and through to Calgary. And there's just an amazing place in British Columbia called Fernie, which is just a lovely little town, and they've got these amazing trails. And I mean, we were there for a couple of days. You could be there for a couple of years, I think, and not ride every trail. It was just perfect.
Wow.
And then the next year we went back and we went to Vancouver. We went south into America, and again stopped at lots of different trail centers. And there was an amazing place called Bend in Oregon, which just again had amazing trails. And again, I think we were only there for 2 days, but you could live there and just ride every day. It was amazing. And then we went back to Fernie because that was our favorite place in the previous year. So that was my favorite overseas trip. In the UK, I mean, we're just blessed with amazing trail centres. So I mean, in Scotland, Glen Tress is amazing. When they're a bit older, that's quite steep, but there's some amazing trails there. There's a place sort of in Dumfries and Galloway called Kirritree, which is really good if they're a little bit younger and getting into mountain biking. In England, I love Dalby Forest in Yorkshire. I think that's a really great place to cycle. Again, that's got lots of different graded routes, so you can cycle with kids of literally any age at Dalby Forest. And Kielder's a favourite. Kielder's one of the places we went before we had kids, so that's always a nice place to go back to. And again, they've got some very easy routes there, just around the reservoir, that you can ride with younger children. And then they've got sort of the graded trails as well. And then I just love riding in Cumbria as well, just on the bridleways. We're blessed here with amazing trails. So I can't really say which is my favourite. We did do a trip round Wales a couple of years, the year before the pandemic. And that was another amazing thing. We started in North Wales and we just spent 2 weeks stopping off at various trail centres on the way. If you go during the week, even though it was the school holidays, we had some of the places it felt like to ourselves. And that one is actually a place called Nantiarian. I think I probably pronounced that completely wrong if anybody's but they've got what they call red kites. They got red kites there. There's a red kite sanctuary, and you can watch them feed the kites, and they all come down onto this lake and feed. But then they all go up high again, and you're sort of cycling at the same level as the kites. It's just fabulous. That was a really special place.
So it seems if people are wanting to get into this, not just as a sport, but it helps you kind of see your local trails, but also further afield, and it's kind of a great way to explore with your family, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think one thing that the pandemic has shown people is that you don't have to go halfway around the world to have a
Yeah.
great time on your bikes. And it's forced a lot of people to actually discover what is on their doorstep, and realize, yeah, hey, there are great cycle routes. And I think this year as well, people aren't going to be traveling as much. So I think a lot of people will be looking to get out and explore different parts of the UK.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think everyone's going to be enjoying the holidays in the UK again. And I guess for people this summer who've maybe listened to this talk and they really want to have a go at it, what would be your advice for a family that want to have a go at this and start cycling as a family this summer?
Yeah, this summer I think is going to be busy. So if you're thinking of going, I'd book up well in advance, especially if you're sort of camping or want to stay away. Obviously, if you're just riding from home, it's a bit different, but if you're wanting to go anywhere, and then especially if you're looking to, say, rent bikes when you get somewhere, make sure you book in advance. Quite a lot of places now have online booking things as well, so you can be certain that you've got a reservation. The roads are going to be busier as well, so I think it becomes even more important to try and find off-road trails. And if you're lucky enough to be at a campsite where you can cycle direct from the campsite, you then don't even have to bother about where you're going to park up when you get somewhere. The other thing is, I don't know what the weather's going to be like this year. So when you do cycle in the UK, you do just have to be prepared for all weathers. So make sure you've got waterproofs and sun cream and everything that you need in between. But my main advice would be just to get out there and give it a go. And just make sure it's fun, and don't set yourself any too big expectations. You're just going out for a bike ride and see what happens and where it takes you.
And you never know, you could be doing it 9 years on.
Yeah,
You'll
absolutely.
be
Well,
completely addicted.
hopefully, yes, yeah.
Oh, amazing. So just moving on quickly, just a little bit. So you've spoken about touring and a bit about mountain biking, but also about road cycling. And you were saying before, when kids are younger, to maybe avoid roads and stuff. But as they get older, and also I think road cycling has boomed over lockdown as well. What would be your advice for that and safety?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean by road cycling, because obviously cars and children don't really mix. Obviously, if you're on a very quiet country road where there's not much traffic and it's not moving that fast, then you can be quite safe with your children on that. And then also road cycling tends to bring to mind drop handlebar bikes and all in lycra and stuff like that, and you can get your kids into that from a bit older than mountain biking usually, because they have to be a bit more aware. And a road bike is a lot more twitchy. It's got the very narrow tires and the drop handlebars and the different bikes. So they tend to be a little bit older before they start that. But we like cycling down dead-end valleys because there's not much traffic. So if you can find a really quiet road with not much traffic on, they can have a great time. It's just obviously, different places have different provisions really. What you want to avoid is when you're on a nice, quiet, traffic-free route, which then suddenly spits you out onto a really, really busy main road. That's what you want to avoid when you're cycling with children. If you're going to ride on road, you want to plan it. You want to know exactly what the type of road is and how you're going to ride on it with your children. So I wouldn't say don't do it, but just be prepared.
Yeah, and just assess the situation.
Yeah, assess the situation. Yeah.
So just before we finish up for this evening, we've got a few questions, which I think are going to be popped on our screen. Yeah, there we go. So do you have any family cycle plans for this summer?
Yes, we are going up to Dumfries and Galloway, actually, which I mentioned before. So hopefully we'll be able to cycle at Kirritree and Glentrool while we're up there. So I'm looking forward to that. And then obviously just getting out, hopefully with the boys. We've gone through a bit of a growth spurt. They didn't, for various health reasons, we didn't cycle much last year during the pandemic, but they've all grown. So we need to make sure everybody's got a bike that fits. And I'm quite worried actually, because they're now getting quite big. So I'm sort of thinking, do I need an e-bike or something like that to keep
Brilliant. And then the next question. Oh, I think we might have had that before.
Yeah, I'll just mention that one again though. Yeah, the coast to coast, it's just a mix of different terrains. So some of it, there's a little bit of steep stuff, but mainly it's wide, flat paths. A lot of people do it with a trailer. So it's kind of very accessible. And you don't have to do the whole lot. There's it's 11 miles there and back, but lots of people, if you've got a younger child, you might just do sort of 5 miles of it or something like that. For older kids, there's little sort of features along the way that you could go off and do a bit of mountain bike type things on as well. And I think there's only about, when we did it, it was about 200 meters on road. I think there was one busy road you had to cross. But it mainly follows the route of an old tramway sort of thing from the tin mines, where they used to take the tin in and out. So, it's reasonably flat.
Yeah, and definitely one that you would maybe recommend with.
Oh yeah, I'd love to ride that again. Yes, absolutely. If you go to Cornwall, it's well worth going and doing that. It's just a bit of a long way from Kendal.
Yeah. So we've got one about traveling abroad. Do you bring your own bikes or do you rent them there?
That's a good one, yes. When we went to America and Canada, we really wanted to take our own bikes because we were planning on doing so much cycling. But we couldn't work out, the bit we couldn't work out was the vehicle hire and how we would transport the 4 bikes in the with the vehicle and the insurance around it. So we ended up having to rent the bikes, which got quite expensive. And for the adults and my eldest, it wasn't too bad though, because they're really into their mountain biking out there. So we got quite good bikes, but the little one, unfortunately, he kept getting put on these really heavy, rubbish children's bikes. Which was a bit of a problem. But other times, I mean, I think when we went to France as well, we hired bikes there as well. But you can take your own. Bikes, and you just need to sort of discuss with the airline how you box them up, your weight limits, that sort of stuff. There's certain rules around it. But we've got an article on our website actually about taking bikes on aeroplanes. So I'll post that in that article I was talking about.
Perfect. And the last one, which is,
have you seen bikes become more child-friendly over the years, or is there still an abundance of very heavy bikes? Do I have a favourite brand or two? Wow, yes. So, yes, I definitely have seen bike design change over the years. When we started 9 years ago, there was only really one quality bike manufacturer called Isla Bikes. And over the past sort of decade, there's lots more quality kids bikes out there. And it makes such a difference to the type of riding that you can do with your child if they've got a lightweight bike. There's now, thankfully, a wide spectrum of quality kids bikes, and so you can pay premium price for a really top spec bike. But there's also a lot of sort of cheaper kids bikes that are lightweight and got proper child size components. When you start to get to the real, what we would call a toy bike rather than a proper bike, they're just really, really heavy. Sometimes they're so heavy that a child can't really maneuver them. The brakes don't work, they rust easily. And it's very, very tiring for a child if they're trying to pedal a bike that is so heavy. And they can't necessarily control it, they're not going to enjoy it. That's why sometimes renting a bike, so the lease scheme I mentioned before with the bike club, if you're paying a small monthly fee rather than buying it outright, but you know that your child's on a lightweight bike, they're going to really enjoy it. And I quite often get asked by people, why doesn't my child enjoy cycling? And it's usually because they're on a bike that they can't manage really. And if you're picking it up and thinking, gosh, that's really heavy, then they're not going to be able to ride it particularly well. So what was the question? Oh yeah, is there an abundance of very heavy bikes? Then yes, there still is, unfortunately. So a lot of people still want to buy a princess bike or a Disney bike, or whatever it is for their children, and I would really advise against that. And do I have a favourite brand or two? I have lots of favourite brands. Loads of favourite brands. There's quite a few behind me on the wall here. There's an Isle of Bide, there's a Vitus, there's a Black Mountain. There's loads of really good bikes.
Well, they were a lot of useful and helpful tips, and I think, as you just mentioned, you've written an article on your website, Cyclesbrog, which covers a lot of the issues that we've talked about this evening on your website. So that is great if people have any more questions on that one. But for now, we'd like to say thank you very much for coming on. It's been really nice to hear about your family stories, and I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of relatable stories.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope if anybody's got any questions about stuff, then do just contact me through the website or through our Facebook account, and I'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hope that you've all enjoyed it this evening, and again, this will be available on Catch Up. So if you've got any friends or families that you think would be interested in family cycling, then you can find this on our YouTube, our Facebook, and our website to catch up. And look out for our next episode, which is all about an art workshop. So the Springing into Adventure series is it's covering lots and lots, so we hope you're all really enjoying it. And again, a massive thank you to Karen G for joining us this evening and giving up her time. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice evening, and we shall see you soon.
Ooh.